So following on with the theme of this week, we are looking at going from extreme to mainstream, the power of inclusive design. And I include this picture here mainly because my co-workshop facilitator and I, Evelina Gadjeva of the Design for All Foundation in Bulgaria, we were joking that on Zoom, everyone just thinks that you have a head. So I put this picture there to prove that I do have a body. It shows two things that I've really taken to in lockdown. One is restoring old things, and the other is gardening. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about inclusive design, but I come from a center, the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design, that's used these principles to conduct over 300 projects with 200 organizations, products, systems, services. Bottom center, you can see Heathrow Terminal 5. If you like the wayfinding there, we did it. If you didn't like the wayfinding, they executed it badly. And there's two words in inclusive design, and one of them is design. But there is a problem with design, and it's summed up for me in these couple of slides. If you type the word designer into SMS or WhatsApp on your smartphone, what comes up is this picture. You know, the designer as artist, the designer slightly looking at like a sort of French person from the 1950s. And it's a real caricature of what a designer is. And I think the presentations that you've seen show that design can be more sensory, more strategic, more storytelling. Indeed, you know, even it has a real depth and a breadth. So I'm just going to talk about five things under the context of inclusive design. Now, they're all two words each because I know we're at the end of the day. Be human, be useful, make better, people first, and show leadership. So the first, be human. Design is around people, for people, by people, with people, because of people. It's pretty inextricably linked. And how does design relate to people? Well, inclusive design is defined by including the needs of the widest number of people in your design. It's a beautifully simple context, and especially those who are routinely excluded. Inclusive design has grown to become written into policy by governments, written into strategy by business, and written into community by neighborhoods. And this example of the Olympic Park, one of the reasons that London won the Olympic Games in 2012 was inclusive design. And these were the strategy documents that the park created to actually show that they were going to create a legacy of inclusivity and accessibility after the Games. It has a 30-year history. It was defined by one of the founding directors at the center called Roger Coleman in this paper that you see on the left. And we continue to create websites and publications around inclusive design. I think it's very much an idea that's come of age aspirationally, politically, and in terms of business and the public sector. It started off by looking at age, you know, exclusion by age or disability, but it's rapidly grown. You know, we describe it as looking at people across the age spectrum, ability spectrum, gender and race. And age doesn't mean older people. The one truth is we're all aging now, and age is really only relevant to your passport. And we talk about ability rather than disability. And yes, there are more than two genders. And race is one of those qualifiers that's just come absolutely into the fore in the last couple of years. In the middle of pandemic, there's been protest. And if you look on the right, typically design is for someone male, right-handed, the guy in that little white circle at the end, in the middle of the diagram. If you include people who have a variety and various needs, people on the edges of this bullseye, you include more people in your design consideration. So this is why we talk from going from the extremes to the mainstream. This was our conference in 2019, which was young, Black, female, and it really signaled a future of inclusive design on the global stage. It needed to be more inclusive. A very simple example of why race matters. This is a company run by one of the Royal College of Art graduates, Akeem, and he is from Nigeria and realized that glasses aren't built for the African features. So his company is all about reframing these things for the African face. Beware of super tokenism. So Barack Obama, first Black president of the US, but often described as a super token. He was just the president. He could have been Black, he could have been white, and some critics say that, was he a super token? Yes, he had a lot of representation, but what could he change by himself? On the right is some efforts made by a university, the Ontario College of Art and Design, where they're doing Black cluster hires, Indigenous cluster hires, so that people are networked when they step into these new positions. They're not the super token. They're part of a new community and new conversations. Inclusive design has a process, and this is one of them, but a lot of it is adding many activities to the fundamental processes of design, exploration, focus, development, and delivery. I won't go into that in detail because the students have been getting this from me all week, but it's quite simply put. Inclusive design isn't just about looking good, like the peacock on the left. It is about doing good. And I love the fact that this chicken is sort of strapped rockets to her back, looks a bit messy, but she's delivering first aid somewhere. And this is what inclusive design in the field can feel like sometimes. A project that we did in East London was with a lighting group, looked at who owns the light in the city space. And this was an area that has seen a lot of change. There's people who've lived there for 8 generations, a Bangladeshi community coming in the 60s. We asked the residents to draw a map of the area. And what is interesting is you get things that you don't see on maps, like a community divide according to race and according to wealth, where this road actually splits a Bangladeshi community with a kind of uber trendy middle-class London community. And because it was taking place, we were looking at what goes on at night. We also got that into our research. So chalk on a black, on a pitch black paper sort of brings some of those sensory capabilities to life. So I really love your presentation just now, because, design is a sensory thing, even if you're doing research. We held a sort of event in the community where we asked what the city at night should be for. People brought balloon representations of themselves. And these guys who were in trouble with the police actually came up with a really creative lighting idea, which was low-level LED lighting for the football pitch. The council had switched off the lights because they couldn't afford to floodlight the pitch. But this low-level lighting they could afford. And what happened with this is the community took over the space again. The drug dealers, the prostitutes moved on. So this low-level lighting transformed the community space. And the police said the crime rate went down by 60% in 2 months. So that was a long one, Ori. The next ones are a little shorter. I'm keeping an eye on the time. Number 2 is be useful. This one, I apologize to the students because we saw this, but can color change a person's life? Yes. In care homes, they put white food on a white plate, on a white tablecloth in a very badly lit environment. Change the color of the plate to blue, people can see the food and they can actually eat. And in some care homes, they actually put on weight. This is what nurses have to deal with and clinicians in hospitals. On the left is all the paperwork for a patient. And for people with acute kidney issues, you need to analyze their urine. And on the right is a piece of design we did called the wee wheel, which allows you to just just turn the wheel, put in the patient's weight, put in the amount of urine they're producing, and catch a problem before it becomes too serious. And 10,000 of these are now out in the hospitals. This is our ambulance project. On the left, you see the existing ambulance with wardrobes in the back. The brief here was, could you restock the ambulance in 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes? And the answer is yes. Working with clinicians, with ambulance paramedics, the design was to replace the wardrobes with these 5 small kind of cases. At the end of the shift, you take them out and you put new ones in, and you've restocked the ambulance in 5 minutes. Number 3 is make better. Make every conversation better. Inclusive design is not death by post-it notes. Yes, we do use them, but you don't just stay there. You've got to go out, you've got to talk to people. And I've been incredibly proud of the students because they have entered into this without question. It took them a while to get warmed up, but they have really thrown themselves into this. This is design. This is inclusive design. On the left is one of our designers, Peter, with an older woman doing her morning routine, her morning yoga routine to understand what health means for older people. And this was a project for technology company Panasonic, who had lots of words on pages, but very little human emotion within their research or human aspiration. When we work in virtual worlds, we do a lot of work with the emerging tech, augmented reality, virtual reality. And this is with the NHS and Oxford University. And there was really 2 drivers for this project. One is virtual reality has become so good that you actually feel like you're encased in a real world. And the second is that people with psychosis and paranoia can find it difficult after therapy to act in the real world, to go out in the real world. So we've been prototyping virtual spaces that allow people to role play going to a cafe, going into a supermarket. And like a game, it's got different levels for you to, of difficulty, from just walking into a shop to actually interacting with people to being in the middle of an altercation. One of our participants actually cheekily said to me, I'd love this on a dating app so I can rehearse my lines in virtual reality before I go out for real. Sometimes not every answer is about technology. This was for an airlines who said their staff aren't using the technology. And there's about 200 staff from 14 departments involved in an aircraft takeoff, turnaround. We realized, and my colleague Evelina realized this by talking to people, that it wasn't the problem of the technology, it's that they had nowhere to put it. So we redesigned the fluorescent vest, the high-vis vest that they wear to contain the technology. Everyone started using the technology. They didn't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to redesign it. So we're getting there, Ori. Number 4 is people first. Really, really incredibly important. Hero the project, not the designer. And today's designers don't necessarily want to be the big names. They want their projects to have big effects. So work with real people. And here you can see some projects where, we've worked with older people on the left. On the right is our youngest ever participant for a project with Samsung. He's 2 years old and he's talking about how communities communicate to our designer, Chris. So Chris is the guy with the beard. He's not the one with the blue hat. Don't talk to fake people. If you type in personas into Google, this is what comes up. There's 7.6 billion people on the planet. Find a real person. Don't make up a fake one, because then you might as well be talking to these two, and what are they going to tell you? So when the pandemic hit, this really hit home for us. So the design community in London all wanted to help, all wanted to design a new mask, a ventilator, put their name on it and help the pandemic. Instead, we asked real clinicians what they wanted, and the answer was surprising. They said 40 to 70% of staff are new because they're students or retired nurses or retired clinicians being brought back in. They don't know where anything is. We spend most of our time orientating people. Can you help with that? So overnight, we worked with clinicians to just create some maps using building drawings. We designed this overnight, shipped it to them the next day, and you can see the response from this frontline clinician, this doctor called Laura on the front line. It reduced the amount of time they were spending reorientating people. And that for me was really the power of conversation. Another quick one here, I think the last case study is autistic people have to fill in questionnaires in order to talk about their likes and dislikes. And we just created this prototype of cards, of images, and they could just put it into boxes, you know, categories of avoid, okay, or like. And it was a game changer for the residential homes we were working with, you know, who house residential autistic adults. This was an absolutely magic moment in our research where James, the autistic adult on the left, he wouldn't enter into a room because he likes to have his back in a corner. He likes to feel secure. And our designer, Katie, who you can see on the right, their textiles designer, just sewed together some textiles that brings the chairs together. And you can see James entering into the space for the first time. And his care manager actually cried because she said she never thought he would ever sit down for a conversation. And these are some other people. You can see Katie there on the left blowing bubbles. The challenge here was, can you create a sensory room for $200 instead of $20,000? And the answer is yes. So very finally, show leadership. Inclusive design is not enough unless you show leadership. And we have this idea at the center called creative leadership. So, and the website is on screen. You can join there if you wish, creativeleaderscircle.rca. And it's just based on the 3 values of empathy, which is very much in inclusive design, and creativity in design, but balances with a tripod of clarity. These are human values. They balance each other. They integrate. You need all 3, but they do not link to qualifiers such as age, gender, race, and ability. Anyone can be empathic or clear or creative. So as a designer, as an inclusive designer, you design to understand difference, but as a human, you step beyond them. So these are the 5 values. And I just wanted to show screenshots of the students embodying this, living this, learning this, and dare I say this, even loving it. And there they are at a care home talking to older people. So finally, some top tips. The great philosopher Denzel Washington said, when you pray for the rain, you got to deal with the mud too. So none of this is easy, but it gets muddy. So be prepared for mud. Design experiences, not products, spaces, services, or systems. You're creating an experience. Design for people, not users or consumers. Users use, consumers consume, but people live. So let's try and remove that language out of our design rhetoric. Don't design from a distance. Immerse yourself as those students are doing. And very finally, you can create the most beautiful, inclusive product, but above all, make sure that your spelling is correct. And it took me 3 months to realize that this menu from Hong Kong as well should say braised vegetable and bamboo shoots. So don't design bamboo shit. Thank you.